Today we're talking to Dr. Robert MacCulloch, Professor of Macroeconomics at the University of Auckland Business School. Professor MacCulloch teaches the extremely popular economics course in the flagship MBA program. Kia ora, Robert. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I studied at the University of Auckland and then afterwards went down to Wellington, worked at the Reserve Bank for a couple of years, and then went to the United Kingdom where I studied economics. Worked for a number of years at London School of Economics, Oxford University, Princeton University in the US, and then came back here about 10 years ago. I take a great interest in this country's economic and political affairs. When Bill English was Finance Minister, he had an academic advisory group that I used to attend, and I also went to the meetings of the NZ Initiative, which is a business think tank.
What is this course, Navigating the Economic Environment, about?
Using the framework of the subject of economics to show how that subject can explain dramatic events in the national and international economy. So events like the global financial crisis, events like the economic fallout from coronavirus, and a large part of the course is going to involve the role of confidence, expectations, crowd psychology. For example, maybe when other people you see selling their shares or their houses, you sell your shares and houses. And it's these kinds of phenomena that mean that behaviour in the aggregate, large numbers of people, can be quite different from what you might observe when you just look at an individual's behaviour. So we start off the course looking at individuals, individual firms, consumers. That's often referred to as microeconomics, and then we build it up and aggregate it up to what is called macroeconomics, which is the study of aggregate behaviour. And the course shows how it's vital that countries design good institutions, good public policies to help coordinate behaviour on good rather than bad outcomes. The difference in this course and other courses on the MBA is it's looking more at the framework. So the word environment is in the title of the course, and many other courses on the MBA are a bit more focused on the actual firm, maybe doing the firm's accounts or the firm's strategy or leadership of a firm. This is more looking at the environment, the framework within which you do business and trying to understand it better. So it shares a fair bit in common with the law course, which is looking at the legal framework. And this is more the economic environment, the economic framework within which you do business.
Does anyone taking the course need to have prerequisite knowledge in economics? Are you able to enter into your paper without very much experience and be okay?
Yes, it assumes absolutely no prior knowledge. It draws on disciplines like economics, a bit of law, psychology, politics, political science, but you need no prior knowledge in any of those subjects whatsoever. What is
the teaching style that you adopt?
Well, it's very interactive. We meet for a couple of hours each week, and the important thing is that you interact not just with me but with your other classmates. So the learning is done from the material in class, but then it's divided between that material, me and you, the students. So the university is very careful to select a great cohort of fellow students, so you should be learning as much from your fellow students as from me. So we meet up, but also you'll meet up with your cohort as well to learn from them and discuss the course. So that's the way that the learning is done in this course.
How does these large macroeconomic factors relate to an everyday person?
Yes, well, several decades ago, this kind of course was one of the least popular in many business schools around the world. In the 90s, business was thriving, there were booms, and it was seen as sort of a golden era, and I think most people were obsessed with just getting on with their own life, making money if you like. The environment was quite good around them. However, over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, this kind of course, Navigating the Economic Environment, has become amongst the most popular, not just here, but in business schools around the world. And It seems that the reason is that there seem to be a lot of external threats and opportunities to firms. And those threats are coming from maybe other countries, from abroad. We live in an era of globalization. And so people have been increasingly aware of issues outside the firm, issues like, of course, the environment and global warming, also shocks like the financial crisis, which may emanate in an entirely different country in the world from ours. Maybe there's a slowdown in China and that wipes out your business in this country, but the reason for the slowdown in China has nothing to do with what's going on here. Inequality is an issue which is reverberating around the world. That can have implications to taxes. Many people want higher taxes to redistribute wealth. And of course that impacts business. You can see, the corporate tax rate go up, the personal tax rate go up. So these sorts of external threats, but also opportunities, seen as increasingly relevant to our lives, maybe in a way they weren't before. So this kind of course, because of that impact, seems to sort of be grabbing the imagination of people like never before.
So what is it about economics that you love, that drew you to the subject?
Well, the question of why some countries have been poor and stayed poor, often for centuries of time, and other countries have prospered, is still somewhat a puzzle, and is a reason why many of us are intrigued by the subject. People growing up in the early 1900s only had incomes they were lucky to have an income of a few $1,000s. And although we complain now that maybe the average income is only $60,000 or so in this country, it's in fact a multiple of like 10 times, 20 times what our great-great-grandparents had. They went by with much, much less than us. So how we've achieved that incredible change in prosperity, and also within a country, how you can have a country with a group that is so wealthy and a group at the same time who are homeless. The idea you can have on a street someone who's a millionaire walking past someone who doesn't have a home. To some degree, that's still a puzzle in economics. How can that be? In an oasis of prosperity, you have some people who are on the streets. So these kinds of questions often, draw many of us into the subject to try to look for answers.
Did COVID, for example, the pandemic, create an interesting lens, economic lens, for you to look at the changes that have happened to us? And will you be covering things like that in your course? Yes,
we will. We're covering all kinds of shocks. Back in 2008, the shock that reverberated around the world emanated in the banking sector, banking and finance, and then suddenly we had a shock coming from, a health shock coming from the pandemic, from COVID. And of course the fallout from the pandemic is still reverberating around this country. It is blamed by many for the situation, the stagnant economic situation at the moment in the country. So what is the best way to react to shocks like that, how it changes the overall economic environment, and back to the title of the course, how you should sort of navigate it and best respond to these kinds of shocks is a large part of the course. An important part of field of economics in the last few decades has been urban economics, and it was assumed that everyone would go into the centre of the city and work in big offices, and now of course many people don't want to and want to work from home, and that's creating an entirely new landscape for the way we work and also the way business is conducted. Commercial real estate, which used to be a wonderful investment, is now, there are a lot of empty office blocks, and that's changing a lot of city life. So there is a great fallout and shift, which again creates business threats and opportunities. So that's really is a theme of the course, that a shock that was not the fault of any of us, none of us were to blame for that. Just the virus blew up, and yet many of us may have had our livelihoods taken away from that. If you work in the healthcare sector, you might have boomed. Fisher and Paykel Healthcare did quite well out of this. Where we're doing this interview is the Gus Fisher Gallery, and the Fisher family still have a lot of shares in Fisher and Paykel, and Fisher and Paykel Healthcare did well. They were making equipment to help people breathe during the coronavirus. So some companies can boom out of, obviously, the drug companies like Pfizer and Glaxo, and other companies have been wiped out because of it. So how an external shock can impact individual businesses is really the main theme of the course.
How do you see New Zealand navigating its political and economic relationships in a Western versus Eastern way?
Mm-hmm. Well, a theme of the course is that when it comes to asking the question, what are the best institutions for a country? The answer for that maybe 20 or 30 years ago was that there is a best set of institutions. Maybe it's the free market ones. In the 80s, the answer was it looked like something that Sir Roger Douglas, who we've had as a guest quite a few times, the sorts of institutions he liked, or Margaret Thatcher, or Ronald Reagan in America, that sometimes they refer to as the Washington Consensus. And since then, the view is changed that the best institutions for a country are the ones that reflect the values and beliefs of the people in that country, who is one group to tell another that their institutions are wrong. And so to answer your question, under this new understanding, if you're dealing with a country like China or the US, the fact is the people in those countries have very different values and beliefs, and their institutions, their legal, economic, political institutions reflect those values and beliefs. And our country's values and beliefs are very different as well, and we're in the process of still forming institutions that reflect those values and beliefs. So the difficulty in resolving tensions is this matter of trying to resolve differences with people, countries that have very different values and beliefs from your own. Can you somehow separate trade and just money from those values and beliefs, or is there going to be frictions because they're fundamentally so different from your own? So whether it's dealing with countries in the Asia-Pacific region or even building our own country's values and beliefs, you can see the frictions there, because within our own country there is quite a large spectrum of values and beliefs about what is best for this country. So that's really one of the great challenges, I think, of politics and economics moving on. How can those values and beliefs be reconciled?
We have a tough time in New Zealand reconciling Māori values with Pākehā values, let alone getting on the same.
Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, yes.
Do you look at the Māori economy at all
yes.
in the paper? And
yes, we do, yes. And we try to understand it within this framework of mainly comparing. It comes up in the case study on inequality that we do, and compares the stakeholder versus the shareholder model. The shareholder model is based more around the owners drive everything in a company. If you're the owner, you're the boss, and you want the biggest profit. The stakeholder approach is much more based on running the company for all the different groups that the company may affect. And so we take a look at how the Māori economy is structured in a way through the iwi trusts, where effectively the beneficiaries are the iwi members, and the idea is that business is conducted in a way not necessarily just to make a fast buck, but to actually look across the breadth of all the different outcomes that can impinge on all the different members of the beneficiaries of the trust.
If I was to take your course, what would I likely get out of it?
The idea of the course is that by understanding the business environment that you work within, the industry you work within, your competitors, are there monopolies, what's the landscape of your industry and the country, and maybe, as you mentioned, forecast better, get a better idea what the government may be about to do in terms of changing the taxes, its spending, how that could all influence you. The idea of having a better understanding and being able to predict better with luck, should give you a competitive advantage as a manager or an owner of a firm.
Yes.
So it's trying to build a better understanding of the environment you're working within, and it should help you specifically that armed with that understanding, you can make better decisions and place your business or where you're working better for the future.
Perfect. Will you be covering things like AI? Or because there's a lot of talk about AI coming in and disrupting the way that we're doing things, which will have an economic impact. Do you look at future, they're not shocks, but how to future-proof yourself, or, I don't know, just to be mindful of the things that are coming?
Yes, technological progress is a large part of the subject, and we look at the drivers of long-run economic growth. We discuss the Industrial Revolution in Britain, which was the first big technological shock, if you like. And it can be compared with other shocks, more modern ones like AI, and the fallout, the good again and the bad from those sorts of technological changes. We certainly will cover in the course.
What is the diversity of students that come? Like, what types of people take your course, and what is the feedback you hear?
The types of students that we've had traditionally in the past have tended to come more from bigger companies in the country. That was my experience. We'd have a couple like from Air New Zealand, a couple from Fisher & Paykel, a couple from Fletcher's, and they'd make up the cohort, a couple from the Defence Forces, but generally quite big employers. Yep. And because we don't have as many big employers as the United States, for example, that's tended to make the MBA smaller here than in countries like the US, where you have thousands of huge companies.
Yes.
But the structure of Kiwi industry, which will come up in other subjects in the course, is we're dominated by SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and often they just employ 3 or 4 people, and the owners don't tend to so much do MBAs. It's seen as it was traditionally more for corporate managers. So our country has traditionally had less big corporate employers, and they do tend to send a couple of people each year, but that's traditionally been the cohort. So maybe in that sense quite different from if you were doing it in the United States.
I went to university, did my master's degree over in New York, and one of the things that I found was wonderful is we're pretty jack of all trades, aren't we? We have quite a lateral, diverse understanding of knowledge, as opposed to the very narrow, deep. That was my experience anyway. So we're quite lucky.
Yes.
You're lucky, I suppose, to be doing a course like yours as an SME.
My view is that we fill a very important niche in the market, because if you did go to the US to do an MBA, it does have quite a different focus from ours. We have access, also being a small country, to virtually anyone we want.
Yes.
We can have as guest speakers, ministers and CEOs, and so you can meet all sort of the who's who, if you like, of the country, which is important. And
in a way that's unfathomable to somebody over in America, right?
Yeah, it's much harder in big countries to get that access. So we try to make it a sort of boutique and intimate in that sense, where you can actually meet the people in the country and get a feel for how the country is working. And we also have a flavour where we concentrate on our domestic institutions, which are very different from other ones, which of course you wouldn't get in the US MBA. So I look at compare the stakeholder with the shareholder model of business, for example, and that leads into discussion on the Māori economy, because it's more based on the stakeholder approach than the profit maximising shareholder approach. So it opens the way into not just local leaders, but also local issues that you wouldn't get in an MBA overseas. Yeah.
And if an international student was interested in coming and thinking maybe that studying economics in a country like New Zealand might not be exportable, they would still gain something by looking at us as a little microcosm of something larger, would you say?
Yes, because We are classified as being a small open economy, so we're essentially a small island economy, but we rely hugely on looking out to the world in terms of trade and tourism. So our biggest export is dairy, of course, and tourism along with dairy, our biggest export. So if you work in Kiwi business, you are going to be probably looking out beyond our shores to sell your product in one way or another. In the US, it's more an economy where people sell into the US within their state or between states. We're much more open than the US. So in that sense, it's a very outward-looking course. We do a case study on China. We look at our major trading partners. So we focus on what's going on within the country, but it's very outward-focused as well. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about having guests. So do you look at, in your teaching methodology, do you have case studies? Do you have guests come in? Like, how is the course structured?
Yes, we do quite a few case studies. There's a background reading textbook which is divided half between microeconomics and half between macro. So we also build up a structure of the subject from that textbook. But probably over half the course is case studies, and we do look at this country, and to make them all more connected with what's actually happening, we do invite guest speakers, and we will do that on Zoom during the course.
Is it true that your course was very popular and doubled in size? So it was a little part-time course in the MBA and now it's a full-time course because people loved it?
It used to be, yes, jointly taught with law. So they both had a common theme, that they were the framework, set the framework within which you do business. And then mine has gone from half a course to a full course, and the law course has gone from half a course to a full course.
Which is exciting.
Yeah.
What is something that's likely to surprise a student taking your course?
Well, many come on the course thinking it's mainly probably economics, which doesn't have a great reputation often as a subject, sometimes called the dismal science, and sometimes folks on the course have done it at school and didn't even much like it. I'm not sure it's a subject that's traditionally been that well taught in this country. And many, I think, when they do the course, are surprised at how interesting the subject can be, and it's quite different from what they maybe were expecting.
Awesome. If you found this interesting, feel free to check out the innovative and world-class MBA at the University of Auckland, where this topic and many other fascinating and important issues are explored.